Hey folks, Jason Pye, your host of the Peach Pundit Podcast, joined by, as always, even though other Peach Pundit contributors are more than welcome to come join this, these two clowns wind up coming on more than anybody else. So Scott, Buzz, hey guys.
Good evening.
We're gluttons for punishment.
Yes, we are. We love it.
Any association with me means you're a glutton for punishment. So we had a lot of news last week, kind of I wouldn't say devastating, but certainly concerning as it relates to Georgia's new election law, SB 202. Major League Baseball and the commissioner himself made a decision to move the All-Star game, the 2021 All-Star game, as well as the MLB draft out of Atlanta. And I can tell you from a personal perspective that I was pretty upset with that decision, and for two reasons. One, I actually I guess Friday, I kind of posted something on peachpundit.com that sort of hinted that I opposed SB 202 just because of the certain provisions of it that restricted voter access, although there are provisions I will concede that expand voter access. But on the whole, I don't like any restriction or any parts of the law that restrict access to voting. But at the same time, I'm very upset with Major League Baseball for moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta. And there's some of that is personal, because I'm sure both of you guys remember the All-Star game came through Atlanta. It was in Atlanta back in 2000. And I did not get to, when the Braves were playing at Turner Field, I didn't get to go to that, and I really wanted to go, but I was too to go. This year I was actually looking seriously at going, and actually just this morning bought 2 more sets of tickets to Braves games. One to take my nephew, and then another one I'm going to go see the Braves Cubs with our good friend Eric Erickson at the end of April. So I was still, up until they decided to move it out, I was still looking at going to the All-Star game. So pretty disappointed, but I guess, guys, you're either boycotting or you're okay with the decision. I guess there's no in between on this. So what was your guys' initial reaction as former lawmakers who had to make some of these tough decisions on potentially controversial bills when you were in the state legislature? What was y'all's reaction to that?
Well, I'm a baseball fan too. I guess this announcement, did it come out Thursday or Friday?
I think it was Friday.
Okay. I'll just be honest with you. It took the joy out of opening weekend for me, just to be honest. I mean, to me, opening weekend in baseball is about as good as it gets. The weather's getting warm, and the trees are blossoming, and I love it. And it honestly, it took the wind out of it. And I don't know. I mean, I can't bring myself to boycott the Braves because it's not their fault. They didn't ask for this. Nothing they did. So what's the point of boycotting the Braves? I don't know.
Yeah, based on the statement the team made, I mean, the team was just as disappointed as I think any fan would be, and they're upset for the players, they're upset for the fans. Scott?
Yeah, baseball is part of my life. I don't know if you can see some of the stuff back here. Like, I got an autograph, Tommy Lasorda photo. I got a Pete Rose over there. A lot of the things that you see on the back of the wall, the 76 Reds are here. Above that is
my 74 Braves hat, my autographed Dale Murphy ball, a couple Braves bobbleheads. Yeah.
Baseball is a part of my life, and always has been. And, I got 2 of my men's teams hanging on the wall back here that were, that I coached in the early 2000s. And, I can't boycott baseball. I just can't, and I'm not going to, because it's part of my life. And it brings me a great deal of joy to watch the game. The problem here is that increasingly in our society, and Ben Sass has been a great voice on this, we are politicizing every dang thing. Yeah. And we're tying our personal health and the things that bring us joy to politics, and our politics becomes more divisive. And we get in a situation where we have to choose between being happy watching a baseball game and making a political statement by boycotting. And I'm just not there anymore. I don't know that I ever was a big boycott fan anyway, but let's not pretend where this came from and how we got here. The president of the United States, Joe Biden, said to Major League Baseball, you ought to do this.
Yeah.
And so they did. Now, is it a big economic impact? We hear in the news, there's $100 million number thrown around. I don't think any economist worth their salt would stand next to one game having $100 million impact on a state. And so we get into this situation where we have to have another conversation about the validity of economic impact numbers and whether or not an event like this
or lack thereof.
Or does it actually cost us money? And I think that we can dive into that a little bit, but I'm not boycotting baseball. I can't. It's too much of a source of joy for me to cut myself off on something that's really, look, Rod Manfred's probably the worst MLB commissioner before this decision in my lifetime. And I say that because of his constant tinkering with the rules. Like, just stop, extra innings worked forever. The reason why you're having a hard time getting a younger audience is because you're flipping postseason games at 9:00 Eastern time and they go until 1:00 in the morning.
Right.
And because you have all this extra stuff. Well, cut out all the extra stuff.
Yeah.
And just play the game and focus on the game. And but he's, I didn't like him before this because last year installing the universal DH, like just on a whim.
Yeah.
It's just, no, stop it. Stop tinkering with the game. The game's older than us by threefold. Stop.
So yeah, I was on a podcast over the weekend. There's a great podcast called High and Inside. It's baseball discussion, and the guy who hosts it, he and I went to high school down at Eagles Landing High School in McDonough, and he's like, look, I know you're involved in politics. I know you work on this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I work on this stuff, but I never really worked on election issues. But like, I'm happy to come on and give my opinion. And we went into that some of that discussion about the rule changes. Like, I don't like the commissioner because of some of the, like last year, universal DH. He's tinkering with independent leagues, trying to try out potential, and minor leagues too, trying to try out potential rule changes that they want to bring to MLB that I think are in some cases are patently stupid. But this is the state of Major League Baseball right now. But to Scott's point on the $100 million economic impact, there's a really great book. If those of you who are listening to this or watching this haven't heard of it, it's called Field of Schemes: How the Great Stadium Swindle Turns Public Money into Private Profit. I am all for private profit, but not at the expense of taxpayers. And I think that's a great book that really informs the discussion, because we hear about how the Super Bowl would bring $1 billion economic impact, and it doesn't quite live up to those expectations. So that's something I think to think about. And certainly I remember this being discussed when they were even talking about building SunTrust Park, now Truist Park, in Cobb County, and that there were commissioners who lost their jobs over that vote, and ultimately didn't get reelected. They were defeated in primaries. The commission chairman being one of the ones who immediately comes to mind. But so that's a part of it. But the one thing I will say that where I kind of depart from Scott a little bit, and Buzz, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm guessing you agree with Scott. Because I remember back in 2015, 14, 16, when Colin Kaepernick was making his protest and other NFL players joined him, and that carried on into last year, where these athletes were making very public statements, either taking a knee or wearing something that, said Black Lives Matter or whatever the case may be, that people were just like, well, can you not bring this into it? This is, we don't bring in politics into sports. And I'm of the mind, as someone who has made a life, made a living doing advocacy and activism, where I don't necessarily have a problem with it, because these athletes have a platform, and if this is something that speaks to them, I don't think they should be told they can't talk about it or can't display some measure of dissatisfaction with the state of current affairs. I mean, certainly that was true when Jesse Owens gave the fist in the air in the Olympics. No, there has been a history of political activism, even protests. You mentioned it was 1968, Mexico City. 2 American athletes raised the fist during the national anthem. So national anthem protests are not new. Even goes back to I forget there was a basketball player
I forget his name, but he refused to put his hand over his heart during the national anthem. The playing
Carlos
of the
Delgado.
anthem. Yeah.
The baseball player, he would protest in the U.S. treatment of the island of Vieques in Puerto Rico.
No, I think there's like in everything in life, there's a balance. Players have the right they don't give up their constitutional rights of free speech when they become professional athletes. But they have to be willing to suffer the consequences, and I think they will lose fan support if certain actions are taken, and then they all have to weigh that in as part of their brand. So, but I think that the player activism is one thing, league activism is another, and I think that's Scott can speak for himself, but I think that I kind of draw a line of distinction between those two things.
So one of the things you just brought up was the consequences aspect, right? And so now we're into this debate really about the All-Star game and who caused it. And so, Buzz, you brought up on the pre-show, a breaking news story. It's being reported on Fox News. Why don't you share that with us? Because that's talk about consequences.
Yeah, it's been rumbling around since this happened. Some various reports that owners were not happy with Manfred's decision because they weren't aware that it was going to happen. There was no discussion. There was also a report, maybe Friday or Saturday, that the players' union, while the players' union representative came out and had strong statements, the players themselves were not involved in any discussions, and no vote was taken. So we don't really, who made this decision. Looking more and more, it looks like this was Manfred pretty much by himself. Then news today, about 5 hours ago now, so around 1:30 or so this afternoon, Charles Gasparino, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, of the Fox Business Network, added this additional part that Manfred's decision came after speaking with Stacey Abrams. So, he didn't say that Abrams, we don't know what Abrams said. And he doesn't know what Abrams says, but he reports that his tweet was, "It's odd since she has been saying she was against the boycott." So he's certainly implying that he got the impression that Abrams was in favor of perhaps telling Major League Baseball, telling Manfred one thing while saying something different in public. Now, Greg Bluestein of the AJC tweeted out a little while later his conversations with sources say that Abrams was urging Major League Baseball not to move the All-Star game. So, we don't know. And obviously, Stacey Abrams would not want to be on the hook for having attempted to urge Major League Baseball to move, because that would be at odds with, her op-ed that she wrote that was in USA Today and other places was essentially saying, don't leave, don't boycott Georgia, do these things, which was essentially code word for give me more money for my organization so I can win elections and stuff.
Yeah, show us that you really care by donating money to XYZ organization.
She even offered a path to redemption.
Right,
businesses who had not behaved properly.
As if she's on equal footing with the savior that give you but she's ignored, interestingly, and so has Mr. Bluestein over at the AJC. They both ignored that it was the president who said they should do this. That's where this started. And so it really doesn't matter if Stacey Abrams was involved or not. In my mind, I know exactly the first person to make a big comment on whether or not the All-Star game should be played in Atlanta this year was Joe Biden.
Yeah. And if you notice, follow-up questions later this week, because of course the Masters starts tomorrow in Augusta. Keith Olbermann was running around saying the Masters needs to be boycotted, and other people were saying the Masters needs to be moved. How stupid is that? Because the Masters is Augusta National, right? It's played on that course. That's the whole point of it. But Biden was asked, should the Masters be boycotted or moved, and he had a very different approach than he did with Major League Baseball. He was, I respect decisions, and these types of things harm the very people we think we want to help, et cetera, et cetera. So,
and Senator Rubio fired off a letter to Rob Manfred and said, "Are you going to like relinquish your membership to Augusta National?"
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I think Marco Rubio said, "I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for you to do so, because then that would show a level of personal sacrifice instead of making the vendors and the small business owners in Cobb County, Georgia, pay for your decision. You would actually have to make a personal sacrifice."
Yeah.
And so Marco's not holding his breath for Rob Manfred to resign his membership over there at Augusta.
So, I mean, you guys informed me of something this morning that I wasn't familiar with, that State Representative Wes Cantrell is making a play to sort of a joke to make Georgia's laws resemble Delaware's election law. Yeah. So what you guys have to explain this to me, because I was driving all day yesterday to Washington, D.C., where I am currently sitting right next to Pennsylvania Avenue, southeast. I'm across the street from Eastern Market. I am curious what he's trying to do here.
So first and foremost, the big disclosure here, Wes Cantrell is one of my closest friends, certainly one of my closest friends in the legislature. I talk with him weekly at least, and it's a joke, but it's with a very serious underpinning message, which is that the president of the United States is calling Georgia's new election reforms Jim Crow on steroids, but his home state of Delaware doesn't allow for early voting at all. It doesn't allow for, I think this is true, the no excuse absentee voting is not a thing for them. So it's far more restrictive than what we have in Georgia or what was proposed in the new law. And so Wes, I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I get it right. So Wes has proposed the President Joe Biden Jim Crow on Steroids Voting Act, which would take Georgia's voting laws and photocopy them, or actually they would take Delaware's voting laws, photocopy them, and make them Georgia's laws, in which case we would be far more restrictive than we are under 202. Now, I will just one caveat. Wes has told me personally, it is a joke. It's a gag. You know, I told him I don't think I would introduce a piece of legislation like that, or I would have gone public. And he said, yeah, he's not going to actually go through with drafting the legislation, but he wanted to bring attention to this issue in a very creative way. He very specifically told me that he didn't want to be a bad steward of taxpayer resources or some attorney that would have to draft the legislation over at Legislative Council. He didn't want to use up their time on something that wasn't going to go anywhere. So he's not actually going to draft that legislation. However, he got national headlines. He's on Hannity and Fox News, and a lot of the right-wing blogs have picked it up and run with it. And, he's bringing attention to kind of this duplicitous double standard that we have in coverage of red state versus blue state.
Yeah, you have to be careful with dropping bills. There was a legislator who years ago dropped a anti-death penalty bill, and he was trying to make the point that we should be against the death penalty. So he dropped a bill saying Georgia was going to switch to using guillotines. Actual piece of legislation was dropped. Of course, never got a hearing. It was he got his moment of fame. Years later, I had a conspiracy theorist email me this to say that, well, here we go. Georgia has the guillotines ready, and once the martial law is imposed, we'll all be lined up. And here's the bill. Here's where it became legal in Georgia. So, yeah, have your fun in the press, not through dropping legislation. So.
Yeah, I forget the guy's name. I think it was 2003. There was a Democrat who had 4 other sponsors on this bill. I remember it very well, that he introduced a piece of legislation that would require restaurants that serve iced tea to make sure they must serve sweet tea, that they're not allowed to serve unsweet tea only. They must serve sweet tea also. And it was a joke, right? But the Michigan newspaper that wrote the story on it, that's still out there today, if you go look it up, they didn't think it was a joke. Like, they're making fun of us, right? So you have to be careful when you get into these gimmicky pieces of legislation.
Yes.
If you're going to actually go there, I mean, they actually went through and drafted it. At least Wes isn't going to draft it. I probably would have pulled him aside and put my arm around him if he had actually drafted it. But
so Scott, let me ask you, in what ways is Delaware's law different from Georgia's current new law?
No early voting at all. I mean, that's first and foremost. You talk about restrictive. They do require ID there, and I have to go back and look. But I think that they also, the caveat here is I'm not absolutely certain off the top of my head whether or not they allow no excuse absentee voting, which obviously Georgia does. Now, again, at one point, SB 202 had a provision in it that removed no excuse absentee voting from the law, but that was ultimately stripped in the final version that passed and then the governor signed. And you saw Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan actually walk off the floor and not preside over the debate over SB 202 when it first passed because of that provision. And the governor was actually threatening to, he didn't actually say he was going to veto it, but he was like, well, I'm gonna take a real hard, close look at these things before I sign them. If it includes stuff like that. So the problem was that the Senate had already shot themselves in the foot by passing the legislation over the lieutenant governor's objection and moving it on. It allowed for the Democrats and certain aspects of the media to create this narrative. And because there are some Republicans in Georgia who were for that, obviously, and they were ready to move.
Indeed, Donald Trump came out and criticized, he's attacking Kemp again, saying that this bill did not go far enough. They should have outlawed early vote. No excuse absentee voting. They should have rolled that back. Right. So yeah, I mean there definitely are. So
what else has been in the news in Georgia over the past week or so since the three of us last talked that I have not mentioned today because I can't think of anything off the top of my head, and I think I've reached the end of our pre-planned agenda.
No, we have another aspect of our agenda that we haven't discussed yet, and that's the Delta jet fuel. One of the things I think is really important.
Actually, hold on 1 second, because before we focus specifically on Delta, there were a couple things I saw come out of legislators. So I've seen obviously the stuff about Delta. I've seen the stuff about Coke, and some of us were Pepsi drinkers already. I'm just gonna go on record and say that there. Some of us have been Pepsi drinkers. You were
cool before your time, huh?
Yeah. So I have my my Diet Pepsi. But I was doing that long before I was doing it before it was cool. So that officially makes me a hipster. I think you guys would already call me that anyway. Scott's not laughing. Apparently I'm not being funny today.
Hit a nerve.
Here's the lie, Jason.
Yeah. But I've seen the letters written from some state lawmakers to Coke saying that they're no longer going to accept their free Coke products. I've seen the talk about the fuel excise tax. I've seen and I've seen people posting on Facebook and Twitter just constantly saying, well, I'm going to boycott this, I'm going to boycott that. But in today's outrage-based media, where the snowflakes on both sides of the aisle, and yes, our conservative friends who are watching this, there are certainly conservative snowflakes. They just happen to mostly be Trump supporters. I mean, this kind of like constant, we disagree with people who companies that take political stances that we don't agree with. So we're going to boycott them. It's getting old. And that applies to both sides. I'm not saying it's one side or the other. It's both sides do it. It's just getting really damn old at this point.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, I certainly understand the frustration of conservatives and Republicans, because look, I mean, Georgia has a very friendly tax climate. Georgia has well over 100 special tax breaks for various businesses and industries. Georgia has done all sorts of stuff for Delta, including in addition to the jet fuel tax. When I first got elected, Delta was on the verge of bankruptcy, and there were even further tax benefits for Delta in an attempt to help them through that time of crisis. So I can understand frustration that if you're a legislator, you think we're doing all these things to take care of the hometown airline, and this is how they treat us. But look, you cannot. It's bad precedent. It's bad public policy to attempt to punish businesses through the law. That's one thing. And it is true that, it's so, there was a guy named Robert Conquest who had some rules about politics. Number two is any institution that is not constitutionally or culturally right wing will eventually become left wing. And I think we're seeing that with corporations. They come down on the side of the left. When Stacey Abrams snapped her finger and said, do this, all sorts of businesses issued statements in line with what she wanted them to say. So yeah, I understand the frustration, but it's bad public policy to attempt to seek retribution. What they should do, and I wrote a post about this on Peach Pundit, what they should do is get rid of most of these special tax breaks, and they should tax only business inputs, and then they should cut the corporate and personal income tax to a level to be more competitive with. Then you don't have this back and forth. You don't have this ungratefulness when a company doesn't say what you want them to say. It's I don't know. It's bad, and it's getting worse, and I don't know where it's going to end up.
The post Buzz wrote on April 5th, so just a couple days ago, Georgia shouldn't punish corporate critics, but it should break its addiction to special tax breaks. And that's one of those things about the every year it seemed like, or I mean, not just every year, but like consistently through the legislature, it always seemed like there was some sales tax exemption or some other tax credit that was being doled out to businesses inside the state. And certainly I know Georgia's film industry is one that's been growing, and but at the same time, it's bad tax policy. Let's cut out the tax breaks and lower the corporate tax rate, or whatever else we should have to do. But let's stop giving away these or doing these special carve outs that all it ultimately does is condense the tax base.
Yeah. The bad thing about going after Delta's jet fuel tax break is that it's not just for Delta. Right. The way it is written today, and I was actually a proponent. I went to the well and gave a speech in support of this because it was the first time it had been written in such a way that it did not only apply to Delta, it applied to the entire industry. And so I'm of the personal opinion that you should not be taxing business inputs. Jet fuel is certainly a business input, and in the way it was written before, in the old days, when I got there, was that it was only for Delta. You had to buy so many gallons, and Delta was the only company that met the threshold to be qualified for the tax credit. So you end up in this situation where you're picking winners and losers as a member of the legislature. And that's not the way it should be. With the current law, allows it to apply to everybody, regardless of how much you buy. And so that's a good piece of policy. And so the problem is when you begin to look for retribution through tax code, you're actually looking to pick a fight, and you're using the force of the law to individually pick on somebody and say, I don't like your political speech, so I'm going to use the law to take away the advantages that you have. And that's tyranny, right? I mean, that's what tyranny looks like. Yeah. That's not good policy. And I'm grateful that Lieutenant Governor Duncan decided he wasn't going to let that go, because that passed the House with, obviously solid Republican support, because they wanted to stick it to him. No, and I understand that, but come on, guys, let's talk about good policy. And one of the things you talk about a second ago, Jason, was like the film tax credit. That's a bad piece of policy, because we're actually we're giving away money to that particular industry. And that's bad when you start taking money from Joe Blow down the street to fund, Tyler Perry, who doesn't need the money. Right. And so where's the populism in that type of policy?
It topped the film tax credit topped $1 billion this year. The last
right. And they have some phony multiplier that they started using in 1970s, early something. And they have no idea why they decided to use like a 3.22 multiplier for every dollar that we give away, we get 3.22 back. Now that's not how it works. Because you don't actually have a tax burden here, what they do is it's transferable. So they sell it. Yeah. And they get cash immediately. And then the corporation that does buy it lowers their tax burden, and you end up with fewer dollars in the coffers. So,
and one thing, I was watching the movie last night with my daughter, and I'm looking at the end, and all these, as the credits are scrolling, they're showing all the different places where it was filmed with all the little logos, because they got tax breaks.
Right.
Hollywood goes wherever the tax breaks are. So we have this industry in Georgia, and I guarantee you, the moment that they figure out they can get one additional dollar of tax break from some other state, they're gone. They're gone, because they. I don't know. I don't know if there's an industry that seeks this out more than Hollywood. I don't know, but
New Jersey has said recently, the governor of New Jersey said recently, we will match Georgia's tax credit if you come film in New Jersey. Yeah. Now, a couple things about that. I don't know if you could handle the smell in New Jersey, but if you can,
would probably offset the tax breaks, right?
Right. I mean, if you can't handle the smell of being in New Jersey, then you're going to have to deal with the fact that they have fewer days of early voting than Georgia.
And we're just nicer down here. I'm in DC right now, but we're nicer in Georgia. It's like,
right. But the big point about the Delta thing is and Buzz has absolutely hit the nail on the head about our tax policy. And this needs to be across the board fair for everybody. And we don't need to be picking winners and losers. The current version of the jet fuel tax exemption applies to everybody. And that's the way it should be for all things. So if we're going to give away a tax exemption on power for manufacturing, it should be for all manufacturers and all types of manufacturing, right? It shouldn't be just for the carpet makers in Dalton, which is the way that they tried to do it one time. If we're going to do some type of historical preservation tax credit, which was one of the really popular ones down in Savannah, especially, then make it available for everybody. Give everybody an equal footing for those dollars. Don't narrowly tailor the bill and write the language in the bill so it could possibly only apply to one thing. We have a museum in my neck of the woods near Cartersville who has a special tax credit that was written to be the exact, you could only qualify if you had the exact square footage that they had for their auto museum, right? And if you didn't have that exact, you didn't qualify. So there was only one. We wrote a law. I voted against it, by the way. We wrote a law that gave a tax exemption to one specific person and didn't allow it for anybody else because it was a political favor for the majority whip at the time.
Wasn't there a bill that it pretty much written to pretty much only exempt sales tax on Super Bowl ticket sales when the last time the Super Bowl was here in Atlanta a few years ago?
Yeah.
So we have all these things, and I get we should give a shout out to an economist at Kennesaw State University, J.C. Bradbury.
Yes, we should.
Rails against this, not the tax credits. He rails against the economic, all of the numbers that are thrown around about economic benefits of this event or that event, and he writes a lot about it. He's been on Twitter pretty active, trying to figure out where the $100 million number came from and what's it based on for the All-Star game. And look, there obviously there is an economic loss to the people of Cobb County and to the Braves for not being able to host the All-Star game. What's the real number? And I think that's what he's trying to get at. Who came up with this $100 million and where did it come from? So
yeah, and JC absolutely does rail against the film tax credit.
Yes, he does.
And so he's a big opponent of that one, but he's also an opponent of stadium funding. So the art of the steel, whatever you mentioned earlier, Jason, he would be a big fan of that type of thing. Yes. JC Bradbury, he's an economist, Kennesaw State, actually worked with them a little bit on trying to draft a piece of legislation to repeal the film tax credit.
You guys remember several years ago when the state legislature, and they may still, I know they stopped doing this for a while, but they were providing funding for all sorts of different halls of fame around the state, the Golf Hall of Fame, the Music Hall of Fame, and they were claiming that there was this economic impact. And I think they did stop doing it for a while. They may have started back doing it. I haven't looked at the budget to see.
I could be wrong. I think it got cut out in a recession, maybe under the last days of Governor Perdue, maybe.
Well, Governor
I think
Purdue
that's
introduced Go Fish back
Yeah,
home
yeah.
That's true.
so he wasn't exactly
No, it wasn't perfect.
Oh no.
Clean
They
hands.
had to they had to cut it out largely because they were looking for cuts back during the Great Recession, and I remember those being cut out because like it was a huge thing I think for all of us who were
Yes.
pushing for the elimination of earmarks at the federal level,
Mhm.
or at least curtailing the practice to some degree. So but they were claiming well this has a the Golf Hall of Fame has a $2 million annual impact on the local economy. It's like you went and you looked at to see how much the state legislature provided funding. It just so happened to be the economic impact was the same amount of money that the state legislature was putting into the Golf Hall of Fame, and the Golf Hall of Fame never even got never even got fully developed, if I recall correctly. And Go Fish has been, or at least it was when Purdue was around, and thereafter it was a boondoggle.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But the College Football Hall of Fame is in downtown Atlanta. I don't know if you can legitimately say that has any net positive economic impact. It's right next to, and it's right next to the aquarium, which probably does draw some tourism.
Yep.
And wasn't really built with a whole lot of tax money, so we get in these situations where it all boils down to this, right? And the three of us are constantly in this world, so we know the answer to this. What's the appropriate role of government?
Yeah.
Should the government be doing these things? And I think you'll find us universally saying no. You guys can speak for yourself, but I mean, I voted no on a lot of this garbage, right? And you had to really make a case that it was for everybody before I would even consider voting for it.
The one interesting thing when you talk about sports stadiums, for example, look at the college world, college athletics. There's no public funding of stadiums there, and we have old historic football stadium. Now the boosters and alumni get together and raise money to renovate them and these sorts of things, but they don't receive large amounts of public funding for these stadiums, and therefore they keep them around for a long time. I think baseball stadiums on average get replaced about once every and football stadiums true about once every 25 years, with a few rare exceptions like Wrigley Field and Soldier Field are exceptions. But Atlanta's had three. It's on its third stadium since the Braves moved here in 1966.
Yeah.
So yeah, and honestly, Turner Field was one of the best. I've been to 15 different major league ballparks and about another dozen minor league parks, and Turner Field did not need to be replaced.
No, I remember when the first game I attended at the new stadium, because one of the things I kept hearing was there's not a bad seat in the house. The sight lines are perfect no matter where you're sitting. It's like my first game, I was like, I found the bad sight lines because it was, I couldn't see, I mean, yeah, I could see the field, but like there were certain, once you got to a point, it just happened to be where I was sitting where I couldn't see what was going on. Like if there was a deep fly ball out to left field, I couldn't see whether it got caught or not.
Right. And if you're at Turner Field on the right field line, you had a beautiful skyline view of the city, look, I understand the reasons why they did it. They had Cobb County bending over backwards, wanting to give them $350 million. Their fan base is more northern than it is southern. So, the old stadium was on the southern side of the city, but Braves fans were willing to travel down there. They didn't have problems selling out games. They didn't have problems with attendance. The stadium was really beautiful. I mean, look, there are a few ballparks I've been to and again, I've been to about 15 that I would say were better than Turner Field. And the new ballpark's nice, but it's not nicer than Turner Field. I'd say it's about equal. So it's just, why are you spending that kind of money?
What they wanted was the battery. If developers and people had developed something like the battery around Turner Field, they'd probably still be there.
Well, they tried to do that with that stupid golf complex or mini golf complex they built there several years ago, but it just didn't work out.
Not like the battery though. The battery is, I gave it to Truist Park about the battery. The battery is an amazing place.
No, you're absolutely right. not even comparable to the Battery.
Right. The Bullpen restaurant over there next to the Country Inn at Turner Field wasn't exactly the nicest place to go have a meal.
No, I only went over to that place once too. I think Americans for Prosperity had an event there back in like 2009 or something like that. And I wanted a beer afterwards, so I went over to the Bullpen and had a beer afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the right place when you walk in and you can feel the beer sticking on the bottom of your feet.
No, I remember. I mean, but like the Battery. I mean, it's a cool mixed use development. I'm not downplaying it at all. Because I mean, I actually went up there just a few weeks ago to get. They were having a sale at the stadium. They were getting rid of old items they didn't want to sell anymore. And, I went over there, I had lunch. I met up with a friend of mine, had lunch, went to the vinyl record store over there and looked around for a little bit. Cause I'm showing my hipsterism here, I guess.
Yeah, hipster.
So
Hipster.
yeah, my collection's growing. I think I'm up to like 75 records now. But
no reason for that.
Yeah, shut up.
You have Pandora or something, right?
I have Spotify.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but
that rich sound out of MP3s. You don't.
No, I mean, I actually hear things in vinyl records that I don't hear on MP3s.
That's absolutely.
Yeah, that's your hipsterism that you hear.
Okay. You can kiss my ass.
Not the first time I've heard you say that.
But it's a cool development. Of course, you have the Roxy there, and I've seen shows of the Roxy, and it's neat. But it's just like, was it worth it at the end of the day? And I don't think it was.
No,
it wasn't worth the taxpayers. I mean, creating an environment where businesses want to be is one thing, but having taxpayers on the hook for so much money as happened is.
Oh, we've got a viewer that had a comment. They said vinyl and Pepsi, and I hear the judgment in the comment.
I mean, I got no response except to say that Diet Pepsi is better than Diet Coke, infinitely better. And yeah, I have had vinyl records for about 20 years now, but I just recently started growing my collection, and it does sound better than MP3s or on anything you get on Spotify. I'm not kidding, and I say this in part because I'm also a musician that I pay attention to that kind of stuff. So yeah. And I use the term musician loosely, although I did write two songs in March that.
Don't be hard on yourself on that. You're pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's in for those of you who don't know, and I don't know if I've ever said this on this podcast, the intro music for this podcast is actually a 30-second clip that I wrote and recorded it myself and all that stuff. So I have fun with my new work-life balance that I'm learning to develop. But I think unless you guys have anything to add, and I'll give you both 30 seconds real quick to add anything we might have missed this week before I cut us off. Scott's got nothing.
This is, I mean, the bottom line for me as we head in, I can't boycott things I love,
Yeah.
Coca-Cola is more than a corporation of people who I disagree with politically. I think we just need to get to a point where we can disagree and still be friends. And me stopping my Coca-Cola habit isn't going to hurt Coca-Cola at all. They're going to get less, $20 less a week out of me. I mean, I'd rather just drink Coke and be happy and be conservative. And
conservatives are really bad at boycotts. Conservatives don't boycott well.
And Scott, just remember the sentencing disparity for regular Coca-Cola is worse than powdered Coca-Cola. I'm sorry, the other way around.
Crack Coca-Cola.
Crack Coca-Cola, yeah.
Yeah, it's worse for crack Coca-Cola.
I have been working on the Equal Act all day long, which equalizes the disparity between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine. So that's where my mind went immediately. So
yeah, I suppose we should, before we go, we should probably speculate a little bit about the political implications of this. I mean, Brian Kemp has seized on this on Major League Baseball pulling the All-Star game, and Abrams and the left whipping this up. He has seized on this, held a press conference with a bunch of legislators and other supporters behind him to say he will not be backing down, and there's no reason to doubt he would back down. I mean, Brian Kemp's a guy who stared down the president of the United States, a member of his own party, on multiple occasions. He's not going to back down from this fight. And
He's certainly not going to back down to Joe Biden. If he's not going to back down to Donald Trump, he's not backing down to Joe Biden.
No. So I think it will be interesting to see. Eric Erickson has proclaimed that that this single act reelected Brian Kemp. That may be a bit strong, but it certainly helps him, gives him an issue to talk about, that Republicans can rally around him.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think it's I think the thing that gets Brian Kemp reelected is his ability to balance the economy and public health. You know, his steadfastness of not giving in to the people who wanted us to be shut down for a year, you know, and wanting to get our economy back open, included the president of the United States at the time, the president of his own party, telling him
openly questioned.
Who said, I did not like this decision by this man, Brian Kemp. That's what President Trump said publicly, even though there's some indication that privately he was telling him, go do whatever you want to do. Governor Kemp is a man of steel. He's not going to bend just because Joe Biden decides to flex some muscle here. Yeah. He's going to fight back. He's going to use it. I think the person who's going to pay for it the most is going to be Senator Warnock. You know, I heard this week that Doug Collins is in fact considering a run challenging Senator Warnock, and if that happens, you know, I think he's going to have this as an issue to beat him up on, because the senator was nowhere to be seen until after this was done, saying, well, we shouldn't be boycotting. He was sort of egging it on, it seemed. You know, he certainly wasn't speaking out against any type of boycotts, and he wasn't engaged in the shakedown scheme that Stacey Abrams was, but he certainly wasn't leading the charge saying protect Georgians. And it is without a doubt that section of Cobb County is African-American and diverse, and it's a multicultural community that's going to get hurt the most by this. And so where are they going to turn? You know,
I think from my perspective, and I said this on my blog post at Peach Pundit, where I basically said, look, I mean, and we've talked about this a lot on the podcast too. It's obvious the racial demographics in Georgia are increasingly unfavorable to Republicans, and it started off. I think I even noted this in my blog post. Yeah, in 2004 it was Clayton, DeKalb, and Fulton. But by 2008, you lost Paulding County, you lost Rockdale County, and you started losing some other counties. In 2012, you lost another couple. You lost these additional counties, and then in 2016 you lost Newton and Henry and the other ones escaped. Cobb and Gwinnett. Yeah. And it's just getting progressively worse for Republicans, where those margins, like the margin in Henry County now, it was, in 2016, I think it wasn't near what it was. I think in 2020, it was 55% for Biden. It's going to keep growing in the wrong direction for Republicans. And look, the elections that took place in 2020 were close to Republicans. You know, we saw that in the runoff in January. And certainly Donald Trump did everything he could to not help himself, yes. And which is, I think, why he lost by the close margin he lost by. But at the end of the day, I think it's an unfavorable climate to Republicans. I think the new vote of election law that passed is going to have some measure of an impact. The question, really? I do, because Democrats and progressives do this better than Republicans and conservatives do. They know how they know people out. Turning people out. Yeah. They know how and Republicans still haven't got it through their thick skulls that their voters are dying. Yeah. They still haven't gotten it through their skulls.
But you're not saying that the law is going to help the Republicans, is what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correct.
No, I think any help it would have provided will be offset by the anger from progressives. They are going to turn out, and they'll turn out in force against this law. They will make their voice heard.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to watch. There have been a number of reports in places that I would never have thought they would be, that people actually starting to look into the bill and saying, "Wait a minute, this isn't as right. This isn't Jim Crow 2.0 like I thought it was. There's some things I don't like, but
I want to be clear. I'm not saying that.
No, I know.
No, we didn't think you were, but the president of the United States is.
The further away you get from the Führer, will that lessen, and to the point where most people wait, it's not that big.
Look, Republicans in Georgia have been accused of voter suppression for decade going on. You know, we had this scenario where the previous Secretary of State was Brian Kemp, and he got to oversee his election. Well, guess what the Republicans just did? They took away the Secretary of State's ability to oversee the state election board. Yeah. And now Democrats are like, what'd you do that for? Well, Stacey Abrams claimed that Brian Kemp stole the election. Yeah. So we leveled the playing field.
And to some degree, the outcry, and I think the three of us know this, and I certainly think anybody who pays attention to what's going on in Congress knows this too. The Georgia law, SB 202, is being used in a way to drum up support for HR1 and for S1, which provide this top-down approach to elections. Right. And in addition to more sinister provisions like donor disclosure and things like that are in this age of cancel culture, are very dangerous.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean so the argument that you'll see at the Georgia level around the donor disclosure, not to go down a rabbit hole too far, is that it's dark money, right? And we need to know.
Yeah, there's no difference
who's
between
behind the money.
There's no difference between some of the comments I heard from Speaker Ralston a few years ago and the comments made by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Sheldon Whitehouse, for that matter.
Oh yeah, you're dead to David Ralston now. Welcome to the club. All right, let's get out of here.
That's totally fine with me. All right, folks. I'll be back in normal Georgia setting next week. And I'll also have my second COVID vaccine. Yes. I'm getting that on Monday, so hopefully I'll be alive and kicking on Wednesday when we record. So
getting mine on next Wednesday, so a week from today.
A week from today. Yeah, a week from today. Yeah, it is a week from today. Yeah.
Or thereabouts.
Thereabouts. All right, folks. Y'all have a good rest of your week. We'll see you soon.
All righty. Bye.